Salvail here today, talking about some cuttings. We're going to do a little bit of propagation today, and some of the cool plants that we deal with all summer are annuals, and the annuals are just beautiful. But you know, when we go into the fall, we often want to, instead of like saving those annuals over winter, what we do is we'll go out in September or October and we'll go and take some cuttings. And generally we'll just take little tip cuttings. I'll show you that right now. But those little cuttings will root quite readily if you have a reasonable little setup. And that's what we have here. This might even be maybe slightly better than what most people would have, but it's basically comprised of a few ingredients. So it starts with a little grow light. So we have a grow light here. It's a little LED light, and it works pretty good. It's nice and bright, and it shines down. I can do most of this table with that light. Then we have a heat pad. So these are seedling pads, and there's a couple underneath here too. They're called seedling heat mats. They're reasonably priced. Usually they're between $15 and $25 each. And this one's a double, so it does 2 trays, and this one's just a single right here. So then we're using some trays. I have some of these 4-packs. So a 4-pack tray fits inside of these trays. That's what these are. Actually, there's 6 packs in this one. But we use 4 packs or 6 packs. We'll just fill them with potting soil. And then we can stick our cuttings in it. Or we can use these little peat pellets, which are also not bad to deal with. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to show you some of the cuttings that we've done already. One of the most common ones are geraniums. So geraniums are plants that people really love, and they grow them every year. And a lot of people bring the plants in for the winter. But we just have way too many plants, and we really don't have enough room for it. So what we do is we go out again sometime around mid to end of September and take some cuttings. So I'm just going to pull one of these out so you can see what it looks like. And these ones, we don't actually put any rooting powder on them, but it's just a little tip cutting. I hope you can see that. And yeah, it's really quite easy to do. We just take little tip cuttings like this. If it has a flower on it, we'll pinch the flower off. And then from there, we just take that and we'll have our little tray, and we just push them into the soil so that the soil covers up the stem. We don't have to cover the tops or anything. Sometimes we'll give them a little mist. So we have a little mister bottle like this, and we'll come in and just give them a little spritz every once in a while. If they look a little wilty, like sometimes there's a little petunia here, and it gets a little wilted after a couple days. So sometimes we do have to mist those down a little bit. But as long as the soil is a little bit on the moist side, that's all they need to get going, and they'll root relatively easily. So we've got some plectranthus here, so that's a variegated Swedish ivy. We've got some Lismachia. That's actually a perennial, but we just do a few cuttings of that just for fun. We have some Tradescantias. These are the Nanook type, very pink variegated. Some more petunias, and we do sort of a 6-pack of each petunia color that we want. And then we have a couple geraniums that we really like. So again, we take those geranium cuttings. But the same theory is about the same as far as petunias. They're generally tip cuttings. And you'll see these things are forever blooming. So they're just going to keep on flowering and flowering and flowering, even when we do cuttings on them. But then we'll put them in, we'll give them some moisture, and generally they're good to go. They like to have a bit of air circulation, but the key are these heated mats. The mats will always keep the bottom at about 75 to 78 degrees Fahrenheit. And so it warms it from the bottom, and that just is the way to stimulate root production. Now, on some types of plants, we also use rooting powder, and you can see this is called stem root, and it's rooting powder number 1. So number 1 is generally for plants that have soft stems, and number 2 is for plants that have semi-hardwood stems, and number 3 is for actually woody stems, like a shrub or maybe a grapevine or something like that. But these are all soft stems because they're just annuals. And it's pretty easy to use this stuff. So it's just a powder, and you can just sort of see in there. But I'll show you what it looks like, because I'll do a couple cuttings right now for you. Now these are some salvias, and I'll show you what I do to prepare for the salvias. I went out and I just took a few of these cuttings off the plant. And what I'll usually do is I like to do a tip cutting like this, generally about 3 inches long. And I'll just pinch out the flower, because we don't want any flowers on it. And remember that the roots come out generally right around the node, which is where the leaves attach to the stem. Somewhere right around close to within, say, 1/2 inch of that little area. So what I'll do is, I know I'm going to stick that into the ground, so I'm just going to snip this off fairly close to that. So you can see, and sometimes I can even take these leaves off, But I find with this particular type of plant, it's pretty good. It doesn't really need much. So, I mean, it's okay to leave a few leaves on it. I just fold them up like this. And then I'll stick it into the rooting powder. So you can see it just turns a little bit dusty, like dusty pink. And then what I'll do is I'll come over here with these little peat pots, and I make a little dent in it, and then I'll just push it in. I'm going to push it in a bit so it gets right inside there, and then I'll just squeeze it, push it together so it presses against the stem. And then I'll just keep repeating that. So not every cutting is created equal. So sometimes I can take cuttings like this one, where I'm going to get a piece of the bigger stem. I'll just show you that. You can see how this one looks. So I got the little tip cutting, and it's actually attached to a piece of the stem. So like that. And that little piece of stem will sometimes root quite nicely too. So we'll just again put a little bit of rooting powder on that and pop it in. Just make a little hole with my finger there, push it in, and squeeze it closed. Now, so some of these are better than others, but I'm just going to go through this really quick. And I can just pinch these off really quick. That's another way to do it. And I can pull off those bottom leaves so you can sort of see what a cutting looks like. And this way, if you want to do some cuttings, again, here's a little cutting that has a little flower on it. So I pinch the flower off. And then I don't need a very long stem. So I'll take that back a little bit. Generally, I want to be about a half an inch from that node. The node, again, is where the roots are going to come out. So we'll have a look here. There's another nice one. I'll pinch the flower off, and I'll snip the node up, snip it a little closer there. So you can start to see a pattern arising, right? This one's pretty good as it is. Just like that. And here's a little tiny one. The little tiny ones will root too. You just have to get it right pushed into where the node is. And here's another one with a flower. So I'll take the flower off again. And I'll snip that stem back a bit. So it's about half an inch long or so. And there you go. So that's sort of what those cuttings look like. And it's not too far off of what these cuttings look like. And so here's another little flower. I'll just pinch that off like that. So there I go. Now what I'll do is I'll sometimes use a little pen or a pencil, and I'll just go ahead of myself here, and I might just poke a few little holes in here like this, and that makes it sort of a little bit easier, like so. And then I'll take my little cuttings and I'll dip them in the rooting powder, and I'll push each one in, push it right down to the bottom, and then squeeze it closed. And those are your, these are basically, they're called tip cuttings, but they're also known as vegetative cuttings. And yeah, you can do this with all kinds of plants. Like I listed a few. I did a little short video not long ago where I was talking about some of the different types of cuttings I like to do out in the garden in the fall, in September. I think it was called Cuttings to Do in September. And now we're just at the beginning of October, but I want to get some of these cuttings done. But when they come in from outside, they're pretty happy. And remember, these were pre-moistened, so all these are wet to begin with. But now I'm just going to go along and give these a little bit of a mist, so they're nice and wet. And what that's going to do is just keep the humidity on those cuttings. So remember, they don't have any roots. So when cuttings don't have roots, they start to lose their turgor pressure. That's the water pressure, and they start to wilt. But if you can keep them sort of turgid, it's called, where they still look like they're not wilting, and then we can mist them with water, they won't wilt. And so keeping them humid is one of the key important parts. But again, on the roots, we just need a reasonable moisture at the roots. But again, having the heat from underneath is really the ultimate key. And so what I do then is, after I've got my cuttings done and I can get rid of any of the debris that I have, then I just keep checking them on a daily basis. Here's a few coleus. Coleus are one of the favorites. This is a sort of a chartreusey yellow-colored coleus with ruffled leaves. And maybe we'll just have a look at one of these cuttings, and it's the same idea. These have only been put in, not too long ago. And you can see that they're actually starting to callus, it's called. And this has only been in for about a week, but they're starting to puff up down here. Again, there's the node. See where that line goes across? And then the branches come up. Most plants have a similar sort of a growing pattern. And Yeah, so again, you could put a little rooting powder on those if you wanted to, but we find these coleus and the geraniums, they root so easy that we often don't have to add any rooting powder on them. We just put them in the tray, push them in, make sure the soil's around the base, and then we just will come in and give them a little mist like that, so they have some moisture on the top and the moisture underneath. We have to check them, especially on these heated pads. Like I can set the tray right on, I can just set the little pack right on there. But I have to check them about 3 times a day, because what happens is that the soil gets really toasty warm, and that really gets the roots excited and gets them rooting really fast. And as soon as they root, and like these little peat pellets, when we lift them out in about 3 weeks, you'll start to see roots growing right through the sides of them from the cutting. And then what we'll do is once they've rooted, we take them off the heated pad and we just set them just on a regular table, but we keep them close to the grow light. So again, we'll keep rotating these trays around. So as things root, we'll take them off the heat. As we take more cuttings, we'll put them on the heat. With these guys, we'll actually take out a 6-pack or so. If it's rooted, we'll take it right out. And one might not be rooted, so we'll leave it another week or 2. So we've just got 3. We've got a double heat pad here and a single heat pad. So it'll do three trays of plants. And it's quite a few plants, as you can see. You can do quite a bit. So then what we'll do is we'll grow these on, and you can tune in a bit later as the winter progresses, because we just keep growing all year round. But when winter comes, these things will be rooted. We'll transplant them into a little bit bigger pots, maybe a little 3-inch pot or so, maybe a 2-inch, and we'll let them root into that, and we'll just keep growing them over the winter. And then if a plant's really happy and it's branching and doing well, and we have the grow light, so that's the key, then what we'll do is we'll take some more cuttings off of it. And then that little plant becomes a little bit bigger, and we can put that, as we get closer to springtime, we can pot those up into 4-inch pots. And then they're getting ready to go, and we'll take some more cuttings. And you can see by the time we get into spring, we've got a really good selection of plants that we've propagated ourselves, and just for the cost of a little bit of electricity, like a little bit of light, a little bit of heating pads. And these guys really, I can't tell any difference in my electrical bill from these. At least where we live here, the electricity is not too expensive, but we really don't notice much difference at all. So again, when I took the cuttings, I put them in my little sieve here. I brought them in and I just gave them a good watering, poured the water all over them so they were good and wet, so that they could wait for a few minutes. So as long as we're keeping them humid, they won't wilt or anything. So that's the key when you first get them in, is you want to mist them a couple times a day at first. So I would say even you could mist them up to maybe 6 or 7 times a day on the first couple days, and then I would go to about 5 times a day, and then to about 3 times a day, and I'd keep up with the 3 times a day for about 2 or 3 weeks. And then at that point, they're going to start to really get going, and we'll be ready for transplanting in no time. So in about a month from now, we'll be transplanting these into bigger pots, probably just one size bigger, and getting ready to go for spring. So a little bit of fertilizer too. It's nice to use a water-soluble fertilizer like any of the Miracle-Gro type fertilizers. There's lots of different products available. And I don't need to give them any food until they actually start producing roots. So once you start seeing roots going, then you can just give them a mild fertilizer. It just keeps them happy and growing. But just remember, again, get the light, get the heating pad, get yourself some sort of little trays, 6-pack trays, 4-pack trays, a little bit of potting soil. If you want to get some rooting powder, again, it's not always necessary, but it does seem to help. And it all works, and that's the basic formula. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Remember to check growercoach.com, and always check in on our garden show that comes every Sunday on YouTube. So check it out. Talk to you again soon.